Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the long-awaited sophomore album from J-Rock, titled 90059. You know, I think I've talked about in the past that a good rap posse often has people falling into specific roles to add variety or cater to different audiences. And for Top Dog Entertainment, filling out that roster is surprisingly easy. I mean, Kendrick Lamar is the leader, Schoolboy Q, the gangsta, Ab-Soul, the weird one, Isaiah Rashad, the more laid-back, fun-loving one who still has some insight, and SZA, the girl slash pseudo-spiritual one. And this leaves J-Rock, the California MC from Watts I've always been inclined to brand as the muscle, the bruiser, the former Blood gang member who will drop ruthlessly hard bars to cater to a tougher rap audience. Now you could argue he shares the most in common with Schoolboy Q, but J-Rock always struck me as harder and honestly a little bit more authentic. Combined with the gruff intensity of his delivery, it's no surprise he managed to snag a major label deal in the 2000s with Warner Brothers off a slew of high-powered mixtapes that precisely went nowhere. He eventually wound up signing with Tech Nine's imprint Strange Music to finally release his debut album Follow Me Home. And while that album was far from bad, it was sort of album that showed the signs of many delays and revisions over an extended development time, especially in the disjointed midsection and the inclusion of the one hit he had at the end of the album, All My Life in the Ghetto with Lil Wayne and will.i.am. Far from a bad album, with solid West Coast flavored production and J-Rock's aggressively potent bars, it's still good, but it lacked the cohesion and the power that would later characterize TDE's later releases throughout the next couple of years. It's no Good Kid Mad City or To Pimp a Butterfly, or even Habits and Contradictions or Control System. And yet, across every single guest appearance on those TDE albums, J-Rock was spitting his ass off, showing some real lyrical improvement in terms of his bars and punchlines, and the hype for this album was palpable. And yet it kept getting pushed back, or delayed indefinitely, or with really bizarre release problems. After an exit from Strange Music last year, singles finally started trickling out at the beginning of June, and I had all the reason to believe that J-Rock was gonna deliver here, but I'll admit I was skeptical. If only because the extended recording process and all those delays might have led to that same lack of cohesion, or it might have been a signal of some problems. But now it's finally here. Does 90059 manage to finally deliver? Well, here's the thing. The long development time does kind of show on this album. It can feel a little bit cobbled together and scattershot around the edges, pretty much across the board. But dipping past that, yeah, I'm gonna chalk this up to being another damn great hip-hop album of 2015 because I enjoyed the hell out of this. It's not perfect. There are definitely some questionable decisions, again, across the board, with this album, but I'd argue the core of it really does appeal to me, and thematically, it holds together surprisingly well, even though I'm not sure I'd slot into the upper echelon of TDE albums, but it is still damn great. So let's start off with J-Rock himself. Now, I'll definitely give him this. He shows off a surprising amount of versatility on this album, from his flows to even some of the vocal affectations he puts on his hooks, all with that hard-edged charisma that can actually take a step back and sound more contemplative on a song like Fly on the Wall. And I was surprised how far he pushed those vocal affectations, from the old dirty bastard demented flow on the title track that I understood in context more than I liked, to more of an upper register flow that honestly did not flatter him at all. It shows up twice on this album, first on Easy Bake and second on The Ways, and while it might be a stab at more mainstream sounding flows, J-Rock is such a strong MC when he's got his lower cadence that those upper flows did get distracting for me. Where he reaps a lot more rewards is handling the hooks under the alter ego of his Lance Skywalker. Honestly, he's not a great singer, but he's not that distracting either. It's not like the other people handling hooks on this album like SIR or on The Ways or Isaiah Rashad on Wanna Ride are that much better. Although I will say the hook on The Message from Vic Smitty was pretty damn great in its own right. I really liked it. Now this leads me to a criticism that I did not expect to make on this album. The guest stars. I'll say it, as much as SZA does a surprisingly good job with her verse on Easy Bake as a counterbalance to J-Rock, although Kendrick Lamar's interplay earlier on the song was way more compelling with all the interweaving blues references, just pretty awesome there. Why do you bring Isaiah Rashad onto your album and only give him the hook with no verses? Strikes me as a waste there. Then on the Black Hippie collaboration track Vice City, I'm sorry, I wanted to like the song a lot more than I did. Yes, I get the intended subversion of rap vices, and Kendrick and J-Rock definitely delivered, but despite some good flows from Schoolboy Q and Ab-Soul, neither of them really delivered the insight of the satirical punch to make the song work as a whole, with Ab-Soul's verse feeling surprisingly sloppy, with the best reference being to the Book of Eli, that pretty mediocre post-apocalyptic movie from 5 years ago. As much as Busta Rhymes sounded great against the production of Fly on the Wall, his verse was really just more congratulatory of J-Rock's success coming from the biggest fly on the wall. Good reference, but I would have liked if he continued more of the story of the song. It just felt kind of out of place, that verse, even despite being pretty good. good. Now, before we get to that story, let's talk about the instrumentation and the production. Now, I've been pretty critical of TDE production in the past for being a little bit too dreary, washing out their melodies and bass and reverb and lacking in energy. But J-Rock pulled together some quality here, drawing together a choppy, fragmented, melodic backdrop to build some great menace to support some hard bars. Sometimes it doesn't quite work as well. The change up to the atonal piano unnecessary really didn't work for me, nor did the oily warbles that ran through the background of the Waves or the first half of Easy Bake, the latter of which felt really suffocated by the bass. But for the most part, it really does click for me. I dug the menacing strings of the blubbery guitar line on Gumbo, that sly little guitar melody that sneaks in behind the chorus on Telegram Going Crazy, or the unstable, eerie vibe of the piano and the beat in the title track. It just sounds as nuts as J-Rock's flow. And pretty much the last three songs are all incredibly good in their production. The dusty, old school minimalism of Fly on the Wall that had such a great vintage flair for me. The distant horns of Money Tree's Deuce against the sparse beats that we got the sequel to one of J-Rock's best ever verses from Good Kid, Mad City. And then there's The Message, which brings more soul to a skittering, watery synth that cascades against those horns. And let's see how a surprisingly bright, albeit uncertain moment to end out the album. It sounds fantastic. One of my favorite songs here. Now this takes us to lyrics and themes. And here's the thing. On the surface, it's very easy to paint J-Rock as just another gang-inspired gangster rapper who spits about hustling, violence, and women. But I'd argue he gives more insight than you typically would give him credit for. The violence, for one, is presented as a necessity, more something than he actually enjoys. Only used when necessary, and he's quick to ask God for forgiveness, even as he's just trying to stay alive here, even though he realizes that it's not much of an excuse for it. And it's far from glamorous, any of it. The title track in particular highlights the bleak, incredibly vivid detail of the horrifying picture of the poverty in Watts, with dreams of success repeatedly being broken in the suffocating, violent madness of it all. It's a horrifying track, and it's done really well. And J-Rock is smart enough to frame his story on Fly on the Wall to highlight the would-be gang member that came from a good home, posing the questions that what would make him do these sort of things, and that there isn't always a clear answer to that question. And I like that he acknowledges to keep a foot in that world, to speak authentically about it, even though he acknowledges it can make him sound a bit like an ignorant fool. Then there's J-Rock's issues with women, where you can definitely tell he's trying to insert more nuance, but I'm not sure how well it always flies. When he calls out the girl for sex on Easy Bake after buying her stuff, SZA's quickly counter back with more of a long-term guarantee that it would be worth it, and J-Rock does acknowledge that. And while Telegram Going Crazy does have moments where J-Rock blasts his girl's friends for not supporting him, which kind of smacks like gaslighting to me, and it still doesn't think all that highly of her, stepping just shy of calling her a bitch, I can appreciate that he's at least trying to stay true to her in the club, and he hopes that she would just not put their drama on social media, which I can respect that. It's definitely clear that hedonism in women is J-Rock's greatest vice, and not just because of the prominent role it plays on Vice City, where he unfortunately compares screwing some girl so hard that she's got war wounds. Ew. But also because it's the element that brings down the would-be gangsta on Fly on the Wall. But to be fair to him, even though those women might be twerking with their kids in the room or stripping for him, there's less moralistic judgment from him and more just an acknowledgement of their own hustle, doing what they can to get by, men or women. If we're looking for the strongest theme of this album, it's that hustle and hard work to get money and just get out of the trap. And J-Rock's best bars on the songs like Money Tree's Deuce, or the classical myth imagery on Gumbo that's really well put together, or the sports imagery on the back half of Necessary. And then there's The Message with the starkest hit of all. It's hopeful to be sure, but uncertain whether or not that change will actually come, or if it does come, whether people will actually be able to see it. It's a real gut punch moment that J-Rock plays with real sobriety, and it really hit me hard to end off the album. That uncertain question, that open question that hangs at the end of the album. Sort of analogous to what Kendrick did at the end of his, but in this way, it hits with a more personal touch that really did get to me. In short, I think this album's going to get underrated by a lot of people for having more of an off-kilter, scattershot vibe in the instrumentation and some of the vocals and lyrics that on the surface might seem to touch gangster cliche, but don't be fooled. 90059 is a smarter album than it'll get credit for, and I like it more with every single listen. For me, it's a light 8 out of 10 and a high recommendation. Folks, J-Rock delivered something that will take a fair few listens to really appreciate beyond the surface, but when you look in, you'll find the seasoning in that gumbo, so definitely check that out. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. Anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, or any other albums coming out that you want me to take a look at, I'd be more than happy to give them a listen. Until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.